And in so many ways, I think, recurring content for artists, it kind of gives you that platform to be yourself beyond just who you are as an artist, to your fans.
Yeah.
And I think that this is kind of a topic that a lot of people don't really take a deep dive into, but it allows you to, build your tribe of people that, vibe with you the way that you vibe with your friends.
Right.
And I think that that's super, super important.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast, brought to you by Entrepreneur.io.
What's up, indies, and welcome back to Creative Juice. I am your host, Corrin Campbell, co-founder and director of growth here at Entrepreneur. And with me, as always from now on, is Jack McCarthy. How you doing, Jack?
Good. How's it going?
Really good. It's rainy where I am, so that has me a little sad face. But other than that, I'm feeling really good. I'm excited about, just everything that's been going on and changing in the music scene over the past month or so. Here at Entrepreneur, we make a joke because a lot of marketing has gone the way of saying these unprecedented times or these uncertain times. And though those things are true, we don't like to use those terms because we feel like it's a little bit condescending. So I'm not going to say things have changed in these unprecedented times because it was precedented in 1918. Go be a nerd and watch Pandemic on Netflix. But things are changing, and it actually is presenting kind of a whole new way to look at how you present your artistry online, because that is more essential than ever, especially if you are primarily a touring artist. So I'm excited to just kind of dive into that. Jack, what do you see kind of spinning out in this episode as we come along?
Yeah, so I'm really excited to talk about it too. I think one of the things that we've been seeing unfolding, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners are seeing unfolding in their news feeds, wherever they hang out, is more and more people going live consistently, and posting content consistently on a very normal, regular basis. So I'm super excited to talk about kind of the developments that we're seeing happening right now in these uncertain times related to that, and how it kind of ties back into the concept of recurring content as a whole, which is something that we have talked about often. It's not a new concept at all, but right now in these times, people need to be paying more and more attention to it and really and jumping onto it, especially if you're trying to engage your fans in a way that you usually would have done in a live context that now you can't do. So I'm looking forward to talking about that and how your paid traffic can actually play a role in that.
Right. And so we're going to be kind of touching on, obviously we've been talking about green light warmth boosting for the last couple of episodes. And this really ties into that, right? Because green light warmth boosting is the strategy that you can apply to things that, maybe really only make sense for, or used to only make sense for, organic content, right? These aren't ads. We're not trying to get people to do any specific thing. It's just advertising to get them engaged or keep them engaged or make them more engaged than they already were, right? So I think that's, it really just goes hand in hand to talk about like, how are we producing this content? At some point you're going to run out of cool beach photos for your IG aesthetic, right? Like there's going to be a point where you're like, all right, well, I probably need to do something a little bit more intentional. And that's where, we have a training in our Indie Pro training vault called Content Blitz Blueprint, which Cirque did. And it's so good. But essentially, like if you've been watching the Full Stack Creative channel, we just hit 10,000 subscribers, which is flames. And that happened because Cirque basically was like, I'm going to make a video. And he just kept on going and making great content. And, if you look at the earlier videos from our channel, they don't look flawless. They're not perfect, right? And we've definitely discussed this before. We've discussed recurring content generally before. But I think now is more of a time than ever where the data is saying, look, people aren't listening to music in a passive, laid back way right now. That is just not the way people are consuming their entertainment. They're consuming it through watching. And it's not just Netflix and Hulu, it's Facebook and YouTube and IG and all these other places where people are like, okay, I love my music, but also I am bored AF. And so bring me something that I can watch. So, I think it's a really great time for us to kind of be revisiting that and hopefully provide you with some inspiration and some kind of actions that you can take to really, just make sure that you are where your fans are, which right now is going to be in that video content.
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about, and indies might be hearing a lot about how more people are using social media right now than ever. More people are glued to their phones, and they might hear terms like CPMs are down or ad costs are lower than they ever have been. And all of that is really true. But there's a side of this that a lot of people don't think about when it comes to their music marketing, and that's where your organic content plays a role in that, where your organic content can take advantage of that.
Right.
A lot of times we get lost in the wanting to automate everything and wanting to just have ads do all the work for us. So I think that this is a really important portion because, like you said, people aren't passively engaging with music quite as much. The data is showing us that they're actively engaging with it. So artists are, they have a huge opportunity right in front of them to take advantage of the fact that people are getting active with how they're hanging out with the brands,
right,
and the talent that they like.
Yeah. I mean, I think more than ever too, even if I actually, obviously I've talked about Bands in Town before as an artist tool, but I also use Bands in Town as a user. So I follow all of the, the musics that I follow all the music that I really like and, check out when they're playing and, whatever for tours. Now, obviously tours are done at the moment and a lot of people are having to reschedule their dates, especially the ones that were coming up. And I think I've seen pretty much everyone who is booked from even August and September have been rescheduling their tours or rescheduling their shows. So instead, artists are like, well, now what? I had this whole tour planned. We have an album dropping, usually we would tour on it. So what do we do? And they are announcing live streams and putting them up in their Bands in Town as a show,
Yeah.
So this is, when you start seeing people who would never live stream usually, right? It's just not what they would normally do. And they're now going live from their kitchen. The bar has been set at both high and low, right? You don't have to worry as much about production and having a super finished, flawless product and worrying about how your video looks as much as you need to, think about, okay, I got to keep up with some pretty big muscle that's coming into the live streaming venue now. So I need to make the content good and I need to make sure the audio is good, right? Because people are going to be very much more forgiving of the live element now that their favorite artist in the whole world is in a dimly lit bathroom,
Yeah.
A good example of this, if you go look at Jason Mraz on YouTube, he has been doing lots of live streams and interacting with his fans and doing a lot of creative things. He's got these terrible space backdrops. If Zoom will take out your background and put some cheesy backdrop behind you. He's doing some really fun and interesting things. So I think
it's very 2000s, knocking out the backdrop a la Apple, early MacBooks.
Yes, early photo booth for sure. And actually photo booth I think still does that. So it's a classic retro look. But in any case, it's setting the bar really high for having authentic content, especially more and more raw live content and, having that conversation with fans that, whether you were a touring artist or not, would typically happen at a show or some kind of live and in-person gathering. So, I think that, that's definitely been something for me as an artist that I'm I don't like being on video. I don't like making videos. I feel really challenged in video. And slowly I've, come around to the same place that I'm going to tell you to be, which is to get over yourself and start making some content. So, Jack, where do you want to kick this conversation off? Because I know we're going to be covering a lot of stuff today.
So yeah, I thought it would be really cool to just give people a recap of what we mean by recurring content, what it might look like, what are some of the things that they need to think about strategically when thinking about where recurring content fits into what they do.
Right. And so a lot of our indies have never been touring musicians or don't plan to be, or they were in the past but don't want to anymore because of family, job, whatever it is. So, live streaming on Facebook is not a new concept, right? Playing live, interacting with fans. Also, people are doing that on IG. They're doing it on YouTube, So now that works great. But as we've discussed before, it tends to work better if you've got same time, same day, if you can do it once a week, or even if you do it every 2 weeks or once a month, whatever it is, making sure that this content is something that people know is coming, right? So they can attend
absolutely.
And be live. One thing that is cool is that, with Greenlight warmth boosting actually as well, you can actually reach more people with this content even after it's concluded. The thing is, you want to get as many people live as you can, because it's that interaction that really is what gets people jiving on it, right? So, obviously that's the first easy answer is like, go live, play. You don't have to play your whole, every song you've ever done. Have some songs picked out. Maybe you like, talking to people in between those, right? Tell some stories, like just have your personality be on video and talk to these people. And if you kind of spread this out, you can start short and start going longer as more people show up. There's a lot of different options there, but that's probably the first basic easy thing, is to be like, okay, I'm going to do this once a week, or I'm going to do this every 2 weeks. Like, I'm committed to it. I'm not going to drop off. I think that is a big challenge for a lot of musicians, is just to make a schedule and stick to it so that people know what to expect. But if you look at the biggest YouTubers or the biggest Facebook creators, that's what you see. They have a schedule, people know when it's coming, and they, attend live as much as they can.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's especially important right now, given, what's going on in the world. Everyone's schedules, artists, fans, businesses, anyone that you would ask, their schedules have pretty much been uprooted from their normal right now.
Right.
So I think that's especially an important reason to consider why, if you're going to dive into some kind of recurring content, whether it be like live streaming, like Corrin was saying, or just, a recurring type of content posting that you're doing. It might be recorded videos, it might be covers that you're posting once a week, whatever that might end up looking like. It is super important to get it onto a schedule, not just for your sake, but for the sake of your fan base, your listeners, who at this point probably are having their schedules completely turned on their heads.
Right.
So I think it's massively important for them to build habits with you based on everything that's going on in their lives.
Right.
If you making that room, in their Monday at 7:00 or whatever it looks like.
What's funny about that is that when I was on Warped Tour, which I did for 3 years. One thing that Warped Tour does, for those of you who are not familiar, is it was a partnership with Vans. And so Vans would put up this big inflatable wall, because Warped Tour has several stages, or had, RIP Warped Tour.
Oh God,
I know,
so sad.
It's so sad. But so there was this big inflatable wall, right? And so every day there would be these 7 stages and all the different artists on these different stages. The only thing that the fans knew for certain, mostly for certain, was which artists were going to be on which stage, right? Monsters left, Journey's right, that kind of thing.
Yep.
So everyone would line up super early in the morning, and it was always unfathomable to me, because I was like, why are these kids lining up like literally 2 hours before doors open, and they're going to be out, and it's like 1,000,000 degrees, and they're going to be dehydrated? And why would they get here 2 hours early for that? Like, that's giving you 2 less hours of non-dehydration time. You know, so
2 more hours of drinking water.
2 more hours of sitting in the sun and dying. You know what I mean? So, but sure enough, every single day they would line up, and artists would work the line and talk to people. But I was like, why are these kids here? Like, why is this part of the culture? And what it was is that as soon as the doors opened, these kids would rush their asses over to that wall, and like they would be the cutest little things. They'd have a little notepad, and they'd be like, okay, at 8:00, and at this, on this date. And so like they were actually weighing the options of who they wanted to see and how to prioritize their schedule. And they would walk around with this like piece of paper, or however it is that they did it, on their phones eventually is how they were doing it. And they would walk around and be like, okay, it's 1:45. We need to get over to the Kevin Says stage so we could see the Canis and whatever. It was just like, Are you kidding me? But I actually was on Reddit and talking with some people who are kind of in that culture. And they were saying like, I'm doing the same thing now with my like live streams with my artists and my makeup gurus and all of these podcasts that I listen to. And like the Joe Rogan, like what time do all these things come live? And they are like, I'm bored and I can only watch so much Netflix before my brain goes numb. So I'm going to schedule these other things in my day. And what's crazy about that is, first off, that any of us on the planet have kind of the facilities to do that right now, where it's like, all right, 5 p.m. It's like, did we go back in time to television when the only way to watch your favorite show was to like sit there and wait for it to start? But that kind of is where it is. And it's like Jack just said, if you can figure out, okay, this is going to be the time and I'm going to set this expectation and I'm going to be able to do this consistently, then once everything goes a little bit more back to normal, you kind of have a slot on their schedule until you're overwritten with something else. And if your stuff is good enough, you may not get overwritten, right? Unless it's like during their job or whatever. But you have the potential here to really just become something that's a part of their long-term schedule over time.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the psychology that this falls into, and it's so important to be able to, right now especially, like with everything going on in the world, like we were saying, like everyone's schedules are just kind of a mess. So right now you're in a prime position to be able to orient people to tune into you, or to hang out with you rather than making it like a self-serving thing. This is about giving people a place to unwind, to hang out, to be to be that little bit of escape that they might need, not to build up people on some sort of ego trip,
right?
But you can be that space for somebody right now.
Yeah. And I mean, there's just so much value in that, right? Like and that's happened in my career as well, is like, I've gone through some mental health things in my life, and I would share that with a lot of the kids who would talk to me. And it's amazing how you start becoming like the go-to, right? And so if someone's like, if they tend to get sad and they're looking for an artist that has a chipper attitude and like really brings them out of that funk, there's a place where emotionally they have a chance to connect with you, and you start serving a purpose in their life beyond just like, oh, look at this nice person playing guitar, sweet, obviously you should never like exploit that or, be inauthentic in that process. But if there's something that is like very true to you or very sincere with you, like live streaming is the best way to kind of get that stuff out there without feeling like you're making some kind of like huge official statement and doing an open letter to your fans about, you know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of a casual, it's in conversation and it's part of who you are. And it gives people a chance to be like, okay, this is something where we're the same, or I identify, or whatever. And so now is just a really great time to be able to get that narrative in there without making it some like specific exploitative or marketed thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the authenticity of it is super, important to consider as well, in these trying times, especially, because people are going to sniff that out right away.
Oh, for sure.
The amount of hate that you see on ads right now that are trying to be exploitative is absurd.
Yeah, for real.
It's crazy. which is good. I mean, to some extent, it should be. Like, if you're not being ethical in a time where, we need it, then you should get hate on your ads,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so I think that's something too, is that, again, as we're applying Greenlight warmth boosting to this, if you're going with live streaming, for example, there isn't really, you don't have to push a narrative, right? There's no call to action. You're not trying to get anything from them, but for them to engage. So there's no pitch. You're not like, hey, come watch me because I'm awesome and you'll love it. Like there's no jargon that has to go in here. And so I think that's what's really kind of cool about that opportunity. Something that I've been seeing a lot of artists do and have a lot of success with when we're talking about live streaming specifically. And I know that Facebook has had kind of watch parties for a while, but YouTube premieres is also, and like YouTube events are really great and same thing with Facebook, because you can schedule these live streams, right? If you know what time you're going live on a regular basis and you can schedule these events, you can ask people to RSVP for it, and they can get reminders in their email or in their notifications, depending on which service you're using. So there are more and more reasons to schedule this and do it on purpose, so you can promote it ahead of time, get even better attendance while you're there, and then also get a lot of better organic reach on the follow-up to people who didn't make it live, because algorithmically, this platform is going to see like, oh, okay, this is successful. They scheduled this event. All these people showed up more than last time, and so it just kind of looks good on your feed. Plus it's content, and it's stuff that you don't have to recreate and don't have to edit a bunch and whatever. I've even seen a lot of artists taking chops from their live stream, right? And taking like little pieces of it and making those into fan finders, or, taking some repurpose of that content, because at that point you've got 30 minutes, an hour, however long you went live, you've got tons of video to choose from there. And it's content that worked because people were there. So they're giving you that feedback, and that's really valuable too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that. Something that we talk about in the Content Blitz Blueprint inside Indie Pro is the idea of taking your live stream content or any kind of recurring content and chunking it down into smaller micro content,
right.
Where you can post it up on IG. You could post snippets on on Facebook, on YouTube, wherever you might want to have it, depending on the format of that particular platform. So it's not just that, your live stream content just sits in one place and lives there. There's so much you can do with it. It almost gives you, it gives you the opportunity to build out a more robust content calendar, which is really cool.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you mentioned that. And I'm also glad that you mentioned the premiering function in a lot of platforms.
Oh, it's so good.
Because even outside of live recurring content, live streaming, the premiere function for, let's say you decided your recurring content strategy was going to be, I don't know, like a music video or a cover video or something like that once a week on Tuesdays at 3 p.m. Being able to set that as a premiere is pretty cool. But I think the coolest part, and where I see a lot of our artists find a lot of success with it, is getting into that premiere with your fans, being a part of that experience, getting in the comments with them. All of a sudden, like, you're hanging out with your fans as they're consuming a new piece of content from you in real time. How much cooler can that get? That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, if they're a fan of yours, that's going to make their day, right? Is to just chat with you. And so if you are someone who feels a little bit of pressure about live streaming and you're not quite there with your game, where you're like, oh yeah, I'll just hop on camera and bullshit with people. Like, maybe you're not comfortable with that yet. That's okay, because especially, and I've done this recently with YouTube premieres, is that I was like, okay, I don't want to like do the whole thing and go live, but I have this video for this song and it's going to be the first time that it's like available. So I'm going to set it as a premiere and then chat, with people while they watch it. And so that was a way that I could still be present. It's obviously not as powerful as if you like go live and use OBS and stream the whole thing and then have your face there and like have this whole complex setup. But in a pinch, it's a great way to kind of make sure that people still feel like you're there and engaged with them while they're consuming your stuff. So
Totally.
I've really enjoyed that. I actually was on the phone with some YouTube music creator representatives last night, and they were saying that, live events and premieres algorithmically have a very similar impact on the YouTube feed. So whether if they're signed up for email notifications or just standard notifications from you, ring that bell. If they have the bell rung, live streaming and premieres do very similar things, and events do live events do the same thing. So the difference is that you can generate excitement ahead of it. The other cool thing about when you're talking about taking snippets from this stuff is like, okay, I'm going to take a snippet from this video to promote and I'm going to boost it so that people see it. But I'm also going to talk about, and this is happening again next week at this time, And so It's just like, it doesn't feel like an ad, but it is an ad, that way you're also not having to like record a whole new video. You're like, hey guys, I'm going to be going live on this day. You don't have to do any of that. Just take a chunk of what you've already done, show them what it's like, and then if they like you, they're going to want to come, have them register and get a notification. And it just grows and grows and grows from there, which I think when, we talk about Greenlight warmth boosting, one of the lead purposes of the strategy is to continue nurturing people and continue educating people and to get your organic reach to go up and up because more and more people have the opportunity to engage with your stuff. So this is doing exactly that as well.
Yeah, totally. And to be able to extend the life of that piece of recurring content, whether it's alive or whether it's not, being able to extend that over the course of the next 7 days until another one happens with just $1 a day traffic is so valuable.
Yeah.
And just keeping it in front of the people who might have missed it, or, giving a replay to the people who were right then and there and maybe just need a little pick me up throughout the course of the rest of their week.
Right.
The fact that you have the ability to follow up with them and remind them that, hey, we did this together. We're going to be hanging out again next week at the same time. Make sure you're there. I don't want you to miss it.
Yeah, I live for that too. Like anything that can make my content last longer. And I've talked about this on the podcast before, but there's just, I'm not one of those post once for every meal of the day kind of people. I post very rarely actually. And I'm a mostly stories artist. I don't like curate my posts and have a vibe. And I'm not saying that in a way to be condescending to people who do that. I'm just saying like, that is so just not who I am. And it's, there's a point where you can't say, well, I'm not going to do that because that's not my brand, if it means that like you're not doing something else.
Sure,
that's kind of what I've realized over time. So, when I first started playing around with the idea, like before it was called Greenlight warmth boosting, really what I was doing was like, okay, I only post content only so often. And I only want to post things that I want to post. I don't want to do a storyline. It's just not really my vibe. I'd rather do these other things. So, but now that I'm only posting once every week or once every 3 days or whatever it is, it's not reaching as many people. And so that's where the birth of the strategy really came in. So to me, one of the key benefits to me using Greenlight warmth boosting is like, cool, I can make some really tight content. I can put it out and then I can make sure it reaches everyone I possibly can to generate that engagement. But it doesn't mean that I have to post something every single day. And I like that. It also feels a little less thirsty. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like I mean, and maybe that's just me. Like I'm a musician and I'm a marketer. So I read content differently than a general user would. But to me, like posting lots and lots of times every day it feels thirsty to me. It feels like, okay, I get it. You want attention. What do you want from me? It just is overwhelming. So, for me, I feel more comfortable with being like, okay, people are going to see it once and they'll hear from me again in a few days. And that is the expectation and that's fine,
Yeah. It's interesting. Something that I see at IndieX specifically with one of our artists who does live stream recurring content. And the way that we use Greenlight Warmth Boosting with him is taking pieces of that live stream, like we said, chunking it down. Sometimes we'll even run full post IDs on that live stream just as a light boost. But what's cool about it, and I think what works really well in this case, is if you've got other awareness generating pieces in your funnel, like a fan finder campaign, for example, at the very top of your funnel, throughout the course of the week, the people who are engaging with you at the very top, maybe for the first time, the next thing that they might see from you is a piece of your recurring content. And then all of a sudden they get swept out, like brought into the undertow, and they're like, oh, this is a thing that he does. Like, I'm going to make sure that I'm there next week.
Yeah.
All of a sudden it pulls people, into that education stage of the buddy system pretty quickly. It's cool.
I think too, that kind of touches on something that Cirque has referenced a lot, right? Which he's like, when I find somebody, I like go searching, right? I'm like, where are they? What have I missed? Like, what do they have out there that I can consume to educate myself about this artist? And yeah, like granted, that's going to be like 1% of the people who hit your top of funnel, if that. But nonetheless, like if you have a ton of recurring content on your YouTube channel or your Facebook page or your IG, especially IGTV, they're going to go dig in there, And so the more that you have stuff where you are interacting with fans, like think about that, right? Like you discover an artist and you're like, oh, tight. I want to go find out more. And then you go to their profile and like they've just got the standard posts and there's nothing super exciting. And they're like, okay, that's cool. But then on the contrary, think if they go to your profile and you've got all this recurring content and there's tons of video of you engaging with your fans and like having a personality and hanging out with them and being really at one with your community, they're going to automatic buddy you so much faster than they would have otherwise.
Yeah.
Because they're like, shit, this is cool. So like, it's just having that backlog of content is just as valuable as looking forward with that recurring content.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with you. And I think, it's really, it has an interesting comparison to how we consume other kinds of content. Think about like when you find a series on Netflix that you really dig and you want to just binge watch the whole thing, or even like other kinds of entertainment content. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and I recently discovered, not so recently now, but prior to the last Star Wars movie coming out, I discovered a YouTube channel that I really like. Shout out to the Stupendous Wave.
Oh my gosh.
It's a nerdy Star Wars YouTube channel with tons of theory and, fan ideas and just like a lot of fan service. And I can't tell you how much of their YouTube channel I dug into prior to the last Star Wars movie coming out. I must have been watching like 4 or 5 videos a week.
Yeah. Dude, I had that moment for a while with Shane Dawson on YouTube.
Yeah.
I don't watch his stuff anymore, but when, back a little further, I used to, and I would be like,
sure, yeah.
Oh, like who's this? And I think this is a good moment actually to touch on collaborations, because more and more YouTube artists, especially, but also on Facebook, more and more artists are doing things collaboratively, right? And it's difficult to do because you can't be in the same room, but nobody cares about that anymore, right? Like you can live stream over there and live stream over here. So like talking with each other, or like you play a song, they play a song. And like on YouTube, for example, only one artist can own that, like you can only do it on one person's channel. You can't like do it from both. But you actually can, like if you want to do a live stream and have another artist set up as a co-host, you can do that. There's a primary host and there's a co-host, and you can both be like recognized in the chat as people who are hosting or a part of it. And if you do that well, you can just kind of like, okay, we're going to sit down for an hour or whatever, and we're going to do half of it on your channel, and then we're going to go over to the other half, and cross promote these things with each other. And, then again, you can use that content. If you want to partner with an artist, you can share audience data from these videos and follow up with them. If you find an artist that is, very like you or has similar fans. So that's another cool opportunity that, again, people expect that this video is being created from someone's bathroom, So it's easier than ever to collaborate with another artist because you don't have to be in the same place and you don't have to have an elaborate setup that allows both of you to be heard and seen properly and whatever, it doesn't have to be fancy. It's acceptable to just have both of you present, and that's good enough. So definitely take a look at collaborations as you get deeper into this kind of web of recurring content.
Yeah, totally. That's such a good point. One of our Indie X clients here at the Indie X agency actually just this week was doing a string of collaboration live streams. It's really interesting how the story unfolded, actually. Our artist was supposed to be hosting a festival at the beginning of April. And obviously the whole thing, unfortunately, had to get postponed. And one of the headlining artists that they were bringing onto the festival, it got postponed till July, by the way. But one of the headlining artists that they had on board for the festival, they decided to, between the two of them, they've been going on and off doing Facebook Live takeovers, I think for the past 3 nights this week.
Oh, cool.
And just... yeah, really, really cool. And just going live from their backyards, playing some songs, talking about how excited they are for July, for the festival, kind of sharing some stories and just sort of hanging out. And it's been doing really, really well. Both of their fans are loving it. They've got kind of a commonality because they're both in the same style of music. So it's been a really, really cool thing to see unfold. And what am I doing with it right now? As I lead their marketing, I'm running Greenlight Warmth Boosting on it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Has the client worked it out with the collaborator to share audiences? Have you done anything like that yet?
So we haven't done too much with the sharing of audiences yet. What we've mostly been working with is cross posting the posts.
Oh yeah.
So we do have the ability to retarget the video views, which kind of serves a similar purpose,
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that we get a lot of questions in the indie community about cross posting because it's a little bit confusing for some people. So can you explain what that is, how you get it to go, and how you can use it?
Yeah, sure. So the cross-posting feature is just a feature that you have in Facebook Business Manager. And basically what it allows you to do is to share a post or a piece of content so that it's essentially being shared from or in collaboration with 2 pages. It's not too hard of a setup to do. Facebook has some pretty decent guides on it, on how you have to go about setting it up and what kind of permissions the page admins have to have in order to make it happen. But yeah, that's kind of the core of it. It just sort of allows you to be sharing the post between 2 pages. That's what we mean by cross posting.
Right. And so when it is posted, so say you've got one artist named Sally and one artist named John, right? Okay. So, and Sally and John do a post together. So when Sally posts it, does it show John at all in the post, or is it just coming from Sally and John happens to be in it? Or is there a tagging? What does that look like when you do a post in that way?
There's a tag where the other page will be highlighted there.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I suppose that, again, it's if you go live on IG and someone else goes live with you, right? Both your followers are going to see that. So it's a similar thing to that. And I actually think that's really cool. We'll be sure to leave a link in the show notes about what that, where that guide is. Chances are, anything we talk about in this podcast, just as an aside, if you go to Facebook Business Help and you search it, you're probably going to find it. Facebook actually has really robust help articles, sometimes to the point where I'm does anyone really need it to be this lined out and, like this step by step. But for a lot of, beginner indies or just people who are using the system, they absolutely do. So, but yeah, we'll leave a link in the show notes. But I think that there's something very underutilized about cross branding and cross posting. And on YouTube, again, YouTube doesn't have the same features. I know that they are talking about implementing some of those features because they know that Facebook is kind of winning in that department right now. But yeah, that is something that definitely, it's still advantageous on YouTube to do as well. I know YouTube also says like, don't upload the same video to two profiles. Instead, like, even if it's just you have two cameras recording and they're two different angles or something, make it different. They don't actually recommend duplicate videos, and it could result in one of the artist's videos being taken down. But yeah, I think that it's a great time and a great idea to start figuring out how to collaborate with other artists, so that you can kind of boost your, I use the word boost too much, but so that you can increase your visibility by, talking to someone else's audience.
Yeah, definitely. The last thing that I kind of wanted to touch on, or another thing that I wanted to touch on, was for artists, for our listeners who might be kind of scratching their heads and saying like, I don't really know what to go live about or what to do beyond just playing my songs.
Are you quoting me right now? Because I'm totally that guy. I'm like, what? Like, it's so easy to, we are so I guess self-detrimental in that way as artists. We're just like, we don't want to be egotistical, right? Like, we're not all going to pull a Kanye and just be like, I'm the best thing and everyone should show up and I could talk about like my, dog this morning and everyone's going to care, So, but a lot of us artists actually get to the point where it's like, I don't do anything but play songs and that's not exciting. And like,
yeah,
what am I even going to say? And only 3 people are going to show up. And, there's a million ways that you could talk yourself out of it. For those of you who aren't aware, like I started it's an Indepreneur series, not a Corrin Campbell series, so to speak. But on Saturdays, I was like, all right, I'm starting this huge launch and I, am going to be trying and experimenting a ton of things that work or don't work. And so I'm going to start Corrin's Corner, which is on Saturdays at 1 p.m. Central. If you want to come by, little plug. But essentially I was like, well, I'll just try it like once, and see if people like it. And, I think maybe like 10, 11 people showed up, which was great, but then the next week I sent out an email to the Indepreneur list and I was like, hey, so this is starting, I'm doing this thing. And if you're interested, just click this button in this email and we'll sign you up for reminders the day of when I'm going to be going live. And there were over 200 people that responded. I think it was almost 300 people that responded positively to that. But the reason it kind of worked, I think, is because I was able to link to an episode that already existed. And I don't think any of those people gave 2 shits that only 10 people showed up to the live session. You know what I mean? Like,
for sure.
It sold them on the idea because it existed. And it's so much easier to be like, hey, would you like me to do this thing in theory and then bother you about it? Than to be like, look, I did this thing and it's cool and other people think it's cool. You should come do it too. And then you're also cool. I think it's just so much easier to do that. So, I was at a loss when I first started doing it. I was like, look, I just need to make myself go live and I'm going to talk about this. And I have no idea if anyone's going to give any shits about it or not. And then once I did, like, people were like, no, this is great. It's really helpful. And it ended up being therapeutic for me as well, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I have people to talk to about this crazy release that I'm trying to manage and sucking at, And so in the same way as an artist, you can do the same thing, just talk about things that are going well and not going well and start making them and then inviting people to look at the past stuff so they can see kind of the proof that you have done this, and that you're going to keep doing it. And so, that has been, I think, something that I thought that I had nothing to say. And I definitely thought that I had nothing to say that anyone would find valuable. But once I started doing it, I was like, okay, somebody did find it valuable, tight, and you're not going to know that unless you just do it,
Yeah, totally. And in so many ways, I think, recurring content for artists, it kind of gives you that platform to be yourself beyond just who you are as an artist, to your fans.
Yeah.
And I think that this is kind of a topic that a lot of people don't really take a deep dive into, but it allows you to, build your tribe of people that, vibe with you the way that you vibe with your friends.
Right.
And I think that that's super, super important. So, taking risks to develop that out and to share more than, just playing songs is something that I think it takes a certain comfort level to get used to, especially if you're just diving into recurring content, especially live recurring content for the first time. You might not want to take the 12-foot the 12-foot diving board into, I'm going to play 3 songs and then I'm going to talk about how, oh God, I don't know, like how I was tormented in high school and I have like trauma because of that.
Right.
Like, maybe that's not where you want to go the first time around. But
right.
just kind of like what I was talking about with like being a huge Star Wars nerd. Like,
right.
Are the people in your fan base like that? Are your fans like that? Do they like the same things as you? This is kind of where you can find out. It's not only a vessel for customer research, but also, it can benefit from customer research. So it's really cool.
Yeah. And, guys, we have talked about this before, but, it bears need for mention in this topic that you can go into your page insights, right? And look at content, even if it's static content, right? Even if it has nothing to do with live streaming, like I've said before, like my best posts are selfies, which obviously a live stream is just a giant moving selfie. So got it. And then there's stuff with my cat, right? People love my cat. And then the rest of it tends to be like, I like to post makeup fails. I haven't as much recently, but back when I was on tour a lot and I was playing every single day and doing makeup looks every single day, I am not a makeup guru. I have tried to learn from makeup gurus, but like I still cannot get my eyeliner to match. All right. And I know y'all who wear liner, girls and boys, you can follow me here, but I suck at make. It does not matter how long I've been doing makeup on my face. I still like just can't get things even and whatever. So I would post makeup fails. So, I mean, it was easy for me to see like, okay, this is the content that works. And so what you can do is look into those page insights and be like, all right, people respond the most when I am talking about, posting about, taking video of, sharing posts about XYZ. And start thinking about like, okay, if I'm looking at these 3 topics, do I have a story for each of these? Like, is there a story I could tell about this? Is there background, like some kind of background I can say about how I got into this interest? It's definitely, I think it's surprising once you start kind of just brainstorm, like just get a freaking pad of paper and brainstorm on these things because so Jessie Gillen Walters, also known as Basic Printer, and Gracie, she just goes by her name, Gracie Phillips Wilson. I think her artist name is Gracie Phillips, just for short. We do an hour of PD. I work with each of them an hour a week. That's part of their massive employee benefits package is an hour with me. But I'm kidding, obviously. But it is fun for me. And they are both very artistic, very expressive people. And so we have been kind of digging into their stuff, especially because now we're not in the office together and they're at their respective homes. And I'm like, now's more important than ever for us to get in PD time because we're not just interfacing throughout the day and having PD happening. And I'm talking about professional development for those of you who are like, what the hell is she saying? So, sorry, I just realized acronyms, military, sorry, it's a thing. So yeah, I have been working with them on their branding. And something that we discovered is that, as Jessie started looking more and more at Basic Printer fans, and as Gracie started looking more and more at Gracie Phillips fans, they're like, my fans are a lot like me. And that's not always going to be the case. Sometimes it's going to be opposite. But typically, right, like your interests feed into your artistry, especially if, you know, you're doing music in a really authentic way and you're telling your stories and, you know, your intent is to share your soul with the world. Chances are the things that you like will bleed into that kind of, you know, that presentation of art. And so what Gracie started to realize is that like a lot of her lifestyle interests were a good match. So she could literally take from a list of things that she enjoys and likes and talk to her fans about it because they're like her. You know, or maybe they don't have the same exact interest as her, but they look up to her. So therefore talking about something that interests her, whether, you know, she's worked in nonprofit before. So she's very passionate about that. She's very passionate about the environment and repurposing and having responsibility there. She's got a really cute sense of fashion, you know, that isn't, it's not the cover of Vogue, right? It's more like a very, I don't know, I'd say it's a light and fresh and really kind of DIY fashion vibe. So like all of those things could be of interest to her fans. You know, same thing with Jesse in Basic Printer. Like his music is eccentric and he, you know, loves like adult comics and you know what so he like sold comic books as like a project for a while. He's got some upcoming products that spin off on, you know, his people liking Tetris or liking puzzles, you know? And so all of these things, it can inform your merch, but it can also inform the discussions that you're having in this content. So you really just have to think more about like, okay, what would I talk about if I were really being myself? And talk to people in that way. Because chances are, if they're a fan of yours, they're going to respond to it. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Totally. That's such a good point. And I think really like 2 really good like little case studies to sort of put that out there in a concrete way, because so often, you know, like there's tons of blanket advice out there about what musicians should go live about. And usually it's like, talk about what happened at a show or like tell a story about the studio, which fine, but it's also vague and it really doesn't let you in on, you know, let you unlock what's going on, like you said, in your soul.
It also, that's kind of like, for me, that feels cringeworthy almost, where it's like, oh, you're fancy, so you do shows. So tell people about a show. I mean, I get where they're probably going with that. They're probably like, tell a fun story about a show. Not like, I was on stage and sweating and I'm awesome. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like that, but it like, that's exactly what you're talking about. That's where it's like, can I get a little more guidance here? Because you're setting me up to sound like an ultimate douche. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. It can put the total wrong idea in somebody's head.
Yeah.
Or just give you nothing to work with, and then you just feel like, well, I'm going to sound like an idiot if I talk about these things, so I'm just not going to do anything and get be continuously paralyzed by the idea of going live.
Right. Okay. So sorry, I know I cut you off, but like I just had to comment that because I feel like I've gotten that advice so many times, and I'm like, thanks, guy. Great. You know?
No, it's so true.
Yeah.
What I was going to say was, I think, you know, you mentioned like having these conversations with your fans and what you're bringing to the table. I wanted to just mention, like, I think it's so important to that stage, to the education stage of the buddy system that we call it, where, you know, you're hanging out with your fans, you're nurturing them at the nurturing stage, but you're educating them on what it is that you're all about.
Right.
And this is like those initial conversations, the ones that you're having manually with your fans, I think that those are like so critically important to the deeper stages of your marketing. You know, when it comes to permission, when it comes to affirmation, when it comes to really building long-time fans, those conversations that you're having where you can get deep with people, that's where the bond is made. So like, you can't ignore it. It's so important.
It's really cool because, you know, we just launched the beta session, we started we opened seats for the beta session for founder permission, which is a, you know, versus our 8-week founder foundations, which is 8 weeks. 8 weeks, which is 8 weeks. Our founder permission is 4 weeks. And it's kind of like a splinter off, right? Because permission is something that people really struggle with. And then very soon, we're actually launching another splinter, which is a 6-week affirmation, right? Which is getting that first purchase. Because these are the two phases that indies struggle with the most in my eyes after education and nurturing, which is what Greenlight Warmth Boosting is, trying to help with. So I was like, all right, well, how do we connect the next ones, And so permission launched and it sold out within 24 hours, which was awesome. And affirmation is going to be, I hope by next week, we'll be able to, announce that that's open and take seats for it. But it's funny because what we're talking about right now, which is like looking at your page insights and having a real conversation and, kind of evaluating like where offers make sense, where products make sense, where conversations make sense. It doesn't change, right? And I know that for me, like I used to live stream a lot more than I do now. When I was first coming up, I live streamed like a mug. And that was, I don't even remember, I keep forgetting the name of it. It was not Twitch. It started with an S. And I can't remember. I can never remember every time I'm trying to reference it. But essentially it was like pre-YouTube, right? Like it was almost like an AOL chat room, but you could put video in it. It was crazy underdeveloped.
OG live stream.
Dude, I have to remember the name of it. I'm going to find it and put something in the show notes about it just so that you can know that I'm not making this up. But I would go live there. And what I realized looking back on it is that live streaming or like having this recurring content and having these recurring conversations actually helped me figure out those other things. Helped me figure out, what does my brand look like? What permission offers make sense? What merch offers make sense? It was the conversations that I had with these people through that content that actually informed the rest of the development of my artistry and the products surrounding my artistry. And so that's another thing that now when I'm talking to people about, getting into this recurring content, especially because right now is just a great time to do it. It's like, but any time would be a great time to do it because you start like, you can mess up, right? It's live. People aren't expecting it to be perfect. So you can just talk. And sometimes you'll put your foot in your mouth. I do all the time. I have 3 times on this podcast already, probably, and like you can just talk it out and get used to the conversation. And it informs so much of the rest of what you do so that when you go to make an offer, for permission, right? Like, how do you talk to people and get them to give you their contact info? What are you saying that's compelling? Not compelling in the whole world, compelling like from me to you, right? Like what could be compelling?
Totally.
And when it comes to making merch offers, like not only the verbiage, how do you talk to them? How do you sell it? But like, what would they give a shit about? And those are the things that you're going to discover through tripping over yourself in recurring content. And so, sorry, I mean, I know I'm going on a thing, but like that just kind of clicked in my head that it's like, I was able to form these things about the rest of my artistry because I was talking to people, listening to how they spoke, listening to how they spoke, caring about their interests, and like integrating that into like, yeah, I like that stuff too. This makes sense, And so I think, yeah, it's just a better time than ever to like start diving into that. Like let your fans tell you about yourself. Cause really, that's really a huge benefit to this.
Yeah, the growth potential there is enormous. Like,
right,
what you can learn about your whole entire brand, your whole messaging structure is so, it's enormous, the opportunity, and all that it takes is just being willing to fail forward a little bit.
Right.
I kind of liken the feeling of it to what it's like when you first start playing shows, like start playing out, early on, like, you're afraid to make mistakes. You're kind of learning what it feels like to program a show, figuring out like what banter makes sense and where, figuring out how your set list all flows together. And like, you're going to mess up so many times. And I think, for a lot of our listeners here who play out, who tour, you've probably gone from, if you're anything like me, you've gone from playing in, VFW hall basements to playing bigger shows and finding your comfort level at each stage as you grow and as you do it more and more. And
Right.
I think that this is an interesting corollary here to what live streaming is like. I think the hurdle that a lot of people might need to get over is, there's a difference between messing up in front of people live when you're on a stage and the moment passes by like a snap, or it feels a little different when you're just looking at a camera and there's nobody else in the room. The insecurity can set in real quick when you realize you just flubbed a word and the internet heard you.
Right. Oh, dude, I do that on this podcast a dozen times. Like I could probably rewind and cite 10 times I've done it in this episode.
Oh, me too. Me too.
But I think that's, one thing, and I'm going to touch back to Jesse because he just does this so well. That's like, he really listens to his people. He connects to them. He has really authentic conversations with them. Their interests overlap. But then also like, we lecture indies all the time about how like your marketing should be fun. Like this should be fun for you. This should be another creative outlet. And I think that when you haven't gone through the discovery process of, the live stream and figuring out your fans and figuring out you and figuring out how that combo works, it does feel like it's I have to do this on purpose moment. It's not natural to you. And you are like looking at templates so that you can make the perfect sales page. And it's like, it's funny because even when I came to Indepreneur, I'd been an artist and selling many albums for a long time. And I never understood why people were like, oh, I need all these templates and I feel really confused about what to say. And I realize now that that's because I've had all this time to like figure out how to talk to my people. And so I don't really feel that same pressure because I'm not selling an info product where I'm solving your problem and like, here's a product to solve the problem of your dog peeing on your carpet. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need to sell them on it. Like if they're here, it's because they belong here,
Totally.
And so being able to talk to them in that way, I really, I think that getting recurring content, putting yourself out there, consistently talking to your fans is why the marketing is fun. I think that's why when Jesse is always like, this marketing stuff is fun. I don't get why people think it isn't fun or it's too sales. It's like, no, it's fun. It's creative. But I think that's why. I think it's because he's been listening and interacting for enough years with his base that it just doesn't feel like work. It literally just feels like more conversation, more fun, more connection. So it's just a weird, I didn't really intend for the podcast episode to go that way, but like I really do think that, when I look at Cirque's Content Blitz Blueprint training and I look at like how he's talking about all this different content, I'm realizing that every single piece of that is an opportunity for people to like find this fun, like make the marketing fun and just enjoy it. And the more in tune you are with this stuff, the more fun it is because it's literally just another expression of who you are. And that is fucking cool, man.
It is really cool. And, to touch on something that a phrase that we use and maybe, and I'm sure we've used it on the podcast, but maybe this is a good way to sort of unpackage it a little more is like we talk about the idea of skipping steps in the buddy system, right?
Right.
And not wanting to skip steps. And when some folks hear that, if you know what the buddy system is and you're familiar with it, a lot of people might hear that and they just think, oh, well, like just don't assault people. They make that kind of logical jump because that's often how we speak about the buddy system in terms of human relationships.
Right.
But maybe when we're talking about the idea of skipping steps in the buddy system, at the education stage especially, given everything that we've talked about in this episode, is skipping steps meaning that you're not really learning how to speak to the people that belong. You use the word like, these people belong in my tribe, and so I know how to speak to them because I know they belong. Maybe skipping steps in the buddy system just means like not totally getting how to talk to the people that belong versus the people who don't, you know?
Yeah. Like, okay, so to go to the human element of this, right? Like you're in a bar and you're talking with someone and blah, 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 right? And so we're getting to the point of, permission where you're like wanting to ask this person on a date, right? And let's say that they're like, they'd be absolutely willing. You don't know this, but they would be absolutely willing to go on a date with you. But you like offer them like, okay, well, I pre-bought tickets for the upcoming Star Wars release and I would love for you to come with me. That's great if they like Star Wars. If they don't like Star Wars, they could decline your offer, not because of you, but because it just didn't make sense for them. And so like it isn't skipping the buddy system in like an assault way, the way we talk about it, where like, she wasn't ready for that yet. You shouldn't have invited her to a movie. No, maybe she needed to go see a rom-com. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like,
totally. That's
a really interesting kind of spin in the buddy system that I don't think we've really like formally, talked a lot about. But it's like, it's not just skipping through assault, but also like not understanding what they want, and both of those things are really important.
Yeah, totally. I think that's really cool. It's a different kind of angle to unpack that idea with.
Yeah, maybe we should talk about that next time because we're at an hour. But I hope you guys learned something because I learned a hell of a lot today just talking shit out.
Yeah, so good. Yeah, so good.
That actually was super fun. Well, hey, Indies, I thank you for joining us for this episode. I had so much fun kind of digging into this, and I'm probably going to leave this episode and like go write down a bunch of stuff that I haven't thought about before. But we're going to be back next week. I hope that you have kind of enjoyed our new format here. We'd love to hear feedback about anything that you'd like to hear. Obviously, we have plans for the podcast for the rest of 2020, but things, the environment has changed a little lately. So if there's something that you wish that you could hear, if you're on YouTube, obviously leave us comments there. You can also hit us up on IG, Facebook, Twitter. We're here. We'd love to hear what you would want us to talk about or any kind of topics that you feel have been confusing to you lately, especially just seeing how we have to kind of change how we deliver things. So I hope that you will hit us up. Obviously, if you want to leave us a positive review on iTunes or anywhere else, we kind of scan those and we'd love to give you a shout out. But otherwise, I've had a fun time today, Jack. Thanks so much for joining on this episode. That's cool.
Yeah, this was such a blast. I hope everybody listening takes what we kind of talked about here and writes it down, take the weekend to think it over and then put it into action.
Yeah. I mean, that's always key, right? Is like, okay, figure it out, but then do something, which is why I'm going to go write stuff down.
Absolutely. Awesome. Like we said, fail forward with this.
Yeah. I struggle with that too. All right. So here's to everyone failing forward. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week on Creative Juice.